Forbidden secrets, intimate health in the Middle Ages, shocking truths. Subscribe to the channel Lived History and leave a like on the video. In the Middle Ages, some diseases were not only a health problem, but a mark of moral condemnation. The most mysterious evils spread silently, corroding not only bodies, but also reputations. Many believed that suffering was a sign of divine wrath, and treatments often resembled torture rather than medical treatment. Fear led to persecution and punishment, leaving the sick not only in pain, but also in social isolation. Have you ever imagined yourself getting sick and, in addition to the physical pain, being accused of heresy or immorality? Today we will explore the dark world of venereal diseases in the Middle Ages. But first, leave your super-like. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this journey through myths, punishments, and terrifying cures. In the Middle Ages, knowledge about diseases was scarce, and every health problem was often attributed to divine or mystical forces. In the case of venereal diseases, the situation was even more dramatic. Syphilis and gonorrhea were believed to be direct punishments for carnal sins. The Church reinforced this view, considering them a manifestation of divine justice. Sinners were forced to publicly confess their sins, and in some cases, to undergo extreme penances, such as long fasts and self-flagellation. Public humiliation was part of the treatment. Some patients were forced to wear distinctive signs or symbols on their faces to indicate their punishment. Alongside religious explanations, disturbing myths proliferated. Some believed that the disease was a sign of demonic possession, leading to actual exorcisms. Others, influenced by Greek and Roman beliefs, believed that it was caused by imbalances in the body's humors, curable with bloodletting and purges. For fear of divine judgment or to avoid the scorn of society, many sufferers hid their symptoms for as long as possible, delaying seeking treatment. But as time passed, the disease worsened, leading to devastating consequences. Without a real understanding of the origins of venereal diseases, medieval physicians proposed treatments that today would seem like downright torture. One of the most common remedies was mercury, applied in the form of ointments or inhaled as a vapor. The result? Severe poisoning, loss of teeth, and often death. Bloodletting was another common practice. It was believed to rid the body of contaminated blood. But in reality, it further weakened the sufferers, exposing them to even worse infections. Some treatments were painful and ineffective, such as genital douching with vinegar or animal urine, which was believed to burn off the infection. Other methods involved forcing patients to sweat for hours under blankets soaked in herbs, or immersing them in boiling baths, which often made their condition worse. Taking advantage of the desperation, charlatans sold miraculous amulets, secret potions, and personalized prayers. Some of these concoctions contained herbs with anesthetic effects, giving the illusion of a temporary cure, but without curing the infection. Thus, the sick quickly returned to the starting point, with increasingly serious symptoms. The most common infections in the Middle Ages were syphilis, gonorrhea, and other genital diseases often grouped together under the name fire because of the burning sensations they caused. Without antibiotics, these diseases could be fatal. Syphilis. Among the most feared, it began with painless sores that disappeared, giving the illusion of recovery. However, years later, the disease attacked the internal organs, causing dementia, deformities, and finally, death. Gonorrhea, also called military drop. It manifested itself with intense pain during urination and purulent secretions. Without effective treatment, many sufferers suffered for years, often isolated from society, considered sinners rather than patients. Among the most brutal treatments adopted in the Middle Ages, one of the most painful consisted of inserting thin, red-hot metal rods into the urethra. This practice, instead of healing, further aggravated the patient's condition. causing even more serious infections. In addition to these tortures, other diseases such as shingles, probably caused by genital herpes or ergotism, caused painful sores and feverish episodes. Because the symptoms varied greatly, medieval physicians often failed to distinguish between the different conditions, leading to misdiagnoses and ineffective treatments, which in many cases were fatal. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church had a major influence on how venereal diseases were perceived and treated. Since Christianity preached chastity and monogamy, any sexually transmitted disease was seen as divine punishment for carnal sins. Church-run hospitals provided care for the sick, but treatment focused more on spirituality than science. Patients were advised to confess, fast, and pray, sometimes as a requirement before receiving medical care. In some cases, illnesses were considered tests of faith, and the sick were urged to endure suffering as a form of redemption. There was also a strong element of social punishment. Prostitutes were often accused of spreading disease and, in many cities, were publicly branded or even expelled during epidemics. Religious minorities, especially Jews, were also often accused of spreading evil, fueling prejudice and persecution. Another curious aspect was the belief in the miraculous power of holy relics. Many people undertook long pilgrimages to touch the bones of saints or drink waters believed to be miraculous, hoping that their faith would be sufficient to obtain healing. Towards the end of the Middle Ages, medicine began to take small steps towards a more scientific approach. Contact with Arabic and Greek medical texts brought new knowledge, but the theory of bodily humors continued to dominate medical practice for centuries. It wasn't until the Renaissance that understanding of sexually transmitted diseases improved. Syphilis, which reached epidemic proportions in Europe, forced doctors to look for new treatments, leading to the first experiments with herbal medicines, specific diets, and more targeted treatments. However, an effective cure wouldn't come until many centuries later, with the discovery of penicillin in the 20th century. Meanwhile, venereal disease continued to be a serious social stigma. Even kings and popes suffered from it, resorting to secret treatments to avoid public embarrassment. Religious morality and a sense of sin continued to influence medicine for a long time, demonstrating that in the Middle Ages, fear and guilt were often as cruel as the disease itself. Subscribe to the Lived History channel if you haven't already, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments.